Qonaya nakhikhawaya yitat kanchish hati arti. Ye awa khoach yat atat aya. Atat you ayitaat ya yitat nak hatude. So let's start off by talking about this real quick, since it was when I came in where folks were already talking about it. So let me put that up there and let me find the entry. Oops. So looking at these different things and what we're doing with this verb, let me change a couple of things here. So this is to get a shot, right? So one is we get knock in front of it, right? No. So there's, so we should be expecting, we're gonna put knock in front of this. So knock is medicine. And then there's a couple of things here to note as we sort of look at this verb and how it works. So just based on some of the conversations we've been having about subjects, objects, who's it happening to, who's doing it, those types of conversations. One is there's this capital S here, and that means that there's a subject. This is whoever is poking the needle. So this is the doctor or the nurse or whomever. So there's a couple different things that happen if we look down at these examples here. So if we say, knock do today a kaushitsak, that's telling you there's a third person subject here. So now you're talking about some specific person. So you say that the person did it. So the doctor, or, you know, if you're in the context of the conversation, you've already mentioned some kind of medical professional who's going to do this. The one right above it has dudle sak, because du is the fourth person. And what that means is somebody did it. A person did it. It doesn't matter who did it, just some person did it. That's why Tlingit often uses the fourth person. So the fourth person just says, it happened. Yeah, I got the shot. And so you use this in English, but the difference would be basically you're saying, the doctor gave me a shot, as opposed to, I got the shot. So then what the fourth person does, it usually just puts the focus onto the action rather than to who did it. And so kids learn how to use fourth persons in English, right? So you come in, there's some plant that got knocked over and the vase is all like, the pot is all just in pieces. And you say, kids, what happened? And they'll say, it broke, right? So there's that nobody did it, right? Or sometimes they'll say, somebody broke it, right? And so like, you know, obviously one of them did it, but this is how they sort of try and keep themselves out of trouble sometimes. And same thing, like if you brought a plate full of cookies when we're all in class again in the same space, and then you're all like, oh, well, let's go out and get some more food. And you came back in and there's just crumbs. And I was sitting there and you say, what happened? I said, somebody ate them, right? And so like somebody is the fourth person. It's somebody, it's a person, or it's just sort of like transfers to just it, right? And so this is why the duh is popping up there. So if you're not talking about really who did it, then you switch to the fourth person. The other tricky thing about this one, because we got to keep remembering subjects and objects and keep those things in mind. There's an object right here, and the object is the medicine. That's what it is. So it is it's being poked in. So tzak, on its own, that verb root means to carry a stick-like object. And so this is how, if we want to look at some, let me open the verb dictionary. Oh, I got that. And I'll show you like just some different verbs that use this verb root, sak. So we'll look at the verb dictionary. So bigger. The table of contents. And then we go down to the Tlingit to English, TS. We keep in mind alphabetically, the verb dictionary is going to go front of the mouth to the back of the throat. So E, and then you go to A, and then you go to U, and you go to Ah. So if we're used to English alphabetizing systems, we just got to remember this one's a little bit different when we're looking stuff up. So then we get sak, and then su is a plural form. So when you're using this verb sak to inject someone with medicine, it's the same verb root you would use for raise your hand. And then there's a plural one, which is used in a place name right over here, anshkashsu. Right? And so if you sing the hokey pokey, you're also going to use the su verb. So there's a whole bunch of things under here. Sticking your tongue out, raising your hand. If you've ever sang that song, Dak yai shatzak wede yake, it's in there. Dak yai shatzak, right? So that's the verb here. So you get to push, to stick your tongue out. Dak sak ish. That's how you command someone to stick your tongue out. And then to place something upright, like a totem pole or a Christmas tree, you're going to raise that thing up. Then we get to pull your canoe. So this would be to use a pole to push your canoe up a river. To connect things. This could also be pushing a canoe out using your arms, using your hands. Poking, especially a sandy beach, or prodding, poking, ramming something poking in, to follow or to pursue. So this is especially like you're going to chase down a seal and make it tired or something, or especially like other seal, like a killer whale is going to chase the seal, because if we're going to chase it, it's just going to go underwater. It's like, what are you going to do, right? Then we get to poke or to prick something with like a needle, to bolt the door, to fasten the deadbolt, to follow a person, to catch up with them, thread a needle, reach for, to reach your hand out, to vote, because you're going to raise your hand to vote, to slacken or loosen the bandage or the rope, to plug in the electrical cord, and to launch a boat out to sea. All of those are going to be this sak verb. So it has to do with like kind of poking a stick out, basically, or carrying sometimes a stick. So then a couple more things on this one. So when we go down here, decha is like a number 2, second one, 2 of them. There's a number of different ways it could be interpreted. But we're just going to look at starting with na, so we're not going to worry about that. And then the ways we've been sort of changing these, knock, do, today, cow do tlitsach. They got a shot. The singular third person, they. Knock, do, today, a cow tlitsach. A singular they gave a singular they a shot. So there's two ways you could look at changing this. Well, I'll put like kind of three options down here. So the reasons we might change these ones down here. So here's de, and in this case, the de is the one who's getting the shots. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky because we've been learning about objects and subjects and objects and subjects. There are some verbs that have what we call an indirect object. What that means is it happens before the verb, like when you say, ach in kananik, tell me, like I'm the indirect verb, I'm the indirect object, and the actual object is the information, right? So there's ach it idishi, that one as well. So any of these ones with the eat or ide, kunchish ach it itletu, thank you for teaching me. I'm the indirect object there. And the important thing to remember with those indirect objects is they're usually possessive pronouns. So that means we're going to go from do to day towards the inside of them to ach to day towards the inside of me. So similar, there's going to be other verbs that you've probably heard that do this. Ach tuwu segu, do tuwu segu. It to woos, and so now you're dealing with a set of possessive pronouns to start changing this verb. So this is where you sort of help keep this stuff straight in your mind, because you could say, the knock would have to go away. This would be really weird. I don't know. I guess there was a movie where they shrunk a person down super tiny and then they would inject them into people. That would be here. So if you said, ach tu de chat kaututlitsach, they injected me into them. So now you got to be a little tiny person, you get injected into them. The other ways is you could say nak, this would probably be more common. Du tu de kautlitsach. Let's say you're a caretaker for somebody and they have to get like an insulin shot on a regular basis, and you learn how to do that. I am now the subject, I am the injector, I'm the poker, I'm poking them. So just in terms of like when we start seeing verbs, and this is where we're at with the language, as we start looking these things up, then we say, oh, there's a subject, that's who's gonna do it. And we say, oh, there's a O and there's an N. Which one is which, though? But when you look at the definition, for the subject to inject the object into the noun. And that's how we start reading these. It's like you got to read the code, but this is the cheat code. Yeah, who was that? Dennis Quaid and Martin Short, if I remember that, Inner Space. Okay, goodness sheesh. That was great. Any other things that are on your mind, questions, things you want to talk about before we move into the lesson?
I got a question. I was talking to somebody on Sunday. I was at the office and we were talking about tea, chayu. Now, in the Chinese language, cha is tea. So that you part, are we borrowing the word from Chinese, possibly? And you at the end, I just was kind of curious about looking into that. Is it a post-contact word, or is that actually before?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we look at the names for things, things have a certain type of name, right? Like when we're at beginning Tlingit, we're just like, what's this called? What's that called? What's this called? What's this called? What's that? What's this? What, and we're doing these sort of fill in the blank type things and just learning a whole bunch of vocabulary. And when I was talking to John Martin, I was like, what are we going to call a noun in Tlingit? And he said, acai. Oh, its name? That makes a lot of sense. We don't have to do this person, place, or thing, business. We're just learning the name. That's why you say wasa, duwasak, nadak, Tlingit chinach. How do people call a table in Tlingit? So now when we get into those names and what those names are, maybe I'll make some more notes here. So for example, the way that I think of this, and I was talking with Zeus, James Crippen about it. So let's say take something like yesh, right? Really short. And so a lot of these really short one syllable words, yesh, chak, booch, hoots. One of the theories that I believe is that whenever Tlingit is being made tens of thousands of years ago, like they're trying to figure out like what are they going to call things. So I think these things are just here already. They're just here. Like what's that? Oh, let's call it yesh. And they make these names somehow get made for it. So that's the first type, is just some kind of name. It doesn't mean anything, right? Chak. There's no way to, yesh, you could maybe argue has some meaning. Oh, sheesh. I guess incredible shrinking woman maybe also could have been there, but I don't know if she ever got injected into anybody. Okay, so the second category is a constructed name. So maybe it's something new that shows up. And then everybody's like, well, what are we going to call that thing? And then they look at it and they figure out either what it does or what does it look like. So for example, gun da da goo goo, which it's a very long, so the names now get long, right? So gun is wood or firewood. Da is around, and then dagook is to peck on something. So that's the name of a woodpecker, just a lot like in English. So like, what's that thing? Well, what's it do? And then you end up with a constructed name. And so I call these a compound noun, where there's little parts in there that you could see. And there's quite a few names that are like this. So this tells me maybe this is like the second generation of things. So Tlingits are already here, and then some new animal comes roaming into the area, and they're like, what are we gonna call that thing? Or some new plant. So like if a really old thing, like sheyi, it probably doesn't mean anything. Duk. There's no meaning in that word. It's the name for something. But then there's other types of wood that have like atdai. That's a compound. It's made up of words that also mean something else. So the third type is a borrowed noun. And so this one gets really interesting. So like dagitgiya is a hummingbird, and it's dakdakdaya in Haida. Wasus is a cow, and it's moose moose in Haida. So if it's pretty similar in our neighboring languages, then it probably came up. And so there's folks who do a lot of studying on where these words come from. And I believe chayu comes from Russian, although they might originate from some other place as well. Maybe some other group borrowed it and some other group borrowed it. So it's kind of fun to sometimes do those tracings, because sometimes they're going to come from French, sometimes they're going to come from English, sometimes they're going to come, and then it might come from French to like Nez Perce or something, and then a Salish language, and then it comes to us. And so it might be totally different by the time it drifts up the coast through the Chinook jargon. But it's fun to think of those. That's all part of like a language's history, is where do these words come from? How do they get absorbed? And some of them They change quite a bit. And maybe wasus comes from moose, which comes from moo. Who knows, right? It's kind of fun to look at that stuff. But yeah, that's a bit about nouns and sort of where they come from. Oh. So I don't speak Russian, but I think this is that's the word it comes from James Crippen's notes. So anything?
I can ask one other question related to that, and I know you talked about it a little bit before, but you know the yang, you know, yang. How come? Is it like deliberately being dropped, or I mean?
Yeah, that's another good question. And so we've had some of these discussions. It's present in Klukwan and Teslan, and I think that's it. If you went back 10 years, you'd find that sound in Yakutat. If you go back 40 years, you'd find that sound all over the place. So languages change over time. Every language does. And a language community has to have these discussions about it, right? Because there's some people who get really upset about people typing like BRB as opposed to be right back. And there's all kinds of stuff that, older generations sometimes get really upset at younger generations for manipulating languages. And new words get made all the time too. So the younger generation will just make a whole bunch of new words. And then the older generation have to figure out what that, is that a bad word? When I say that thing, is that a bad word? And so some of the things that also happen is sounds change. Like if you really listen to people who are speaking English, if you could just get in a time machine and go back a couple hundred years and you just listen to people, you'd probably be like, what? And just trying to figure out what folks are talking about, because the rhythm of it changes and other things. And we can listen to speakers going back 120 years in Tlingit. And so there are a couple of changes, and this is probably one of the bigger changes, is the sort of absorption of this into two other sounds. So this usually becomes either a Y or a W. And some of the places where it reveals itself is where you have a little bit of back and forth. Like if you listen to some older speakers, long time ago, when you're gonna say, how do I say a singular there, so they, she or he, their child. How do I say that in Tlingit? Anybody know? Anybody?
Yadi.
Yep, so do yadi. So a long time ago, if you listen to speakers, they would say do wadi. So what happens is when you have this sound, sometimes you have it'll switch right over to a W sometimes. And what causes it is this, because this vowel is located further back. So basically, or closer to the front. So things that are closer to the front end up with sort of a W sound, and things that are more in the back of the mouth end up with a Y sound. Because to make a you kind of put your lips forward, and then to make a yeah, then you pull your lips back. And so, but when we see it in other places, like, so here's a phrase. So everybody just say, Ganesh cheese hati adi. So this second Y is kind of sometimes hard to hear, but it should be there. So what you're doing is you're going yi di. So you're just giving like this little kind of smile almost right in the middle of that when you're saying the yi part. If you were in Teslan, you'll hear the elders say, Goodness cheese hot ying adi. So that it's there, it is distinctly there. You will hear it. And you'll hear it in a number of other places. But what was interesting is how some of their sounds, when you get the W going to the M, right? So there's some parts in verbs where it's very clear, very predictable. So we say oudagon, and you'd say umdagon, right? So it's a predictable thing in Teslin. But then in some of the nouns, it's there. Like they'll say gumdon, and that's not a verb. And they'll say it's a borrowed noun, right? It comes from another language. And then they'll say gam or or one of the really interesting things. So how do you say it's blue in Tlingit?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we put the yachyati, or else we're just saying a stellar jay, a blue jay.
Right.
But that is not how they say blue in Teslin. Why do you think that is?
No blue jays.
Ain't no blue jays there, right? So they'll be like, what the heck is cheish? What are you talking about?
What do they say?
So what does this, how do you translate this?
Oh. It looks like jade.
Oh.
Yeah, it looks like jade, or it's green, right? So this is green. It comes from, it looks like it's like jade, right? Literally like jade. So if we look at this W to M thing, this is what you're going to hear. Sum yachyati. But that's blue.
That's blue.
There's some interesting things going on in here, because you get a sound switch and you also get a color switch, and you also start wondering, like, is the jade blue up there? And so it's really interesting to think about. And I started theorizing, well, maybe this is where the color comes from for like the bluish green and in our artwork, but that's also not the case. There's this rock that's called Nechin Te, and that's where the old school greenish blue comes from, that goes into like masks and totem poles and stuff. And that stone is really hard to get, and bad weather comes whenever you break it off. So it's really interesting. But anyways, this is a shift that's been steadily happening over the past, especially the last 100 years. It's probably just kind of disappeared. And it's one of those things where we've had conversations about, should we make an effort to bring it back? And my suggestion has been, well, if it's gone from the community, it might be hard to bring it back to figure out where exactly that sound was because it was a little bit different in every place. In Teslin, they certainly still have it. We teach it, we document it, and and when you look up stuff, you might see this y, this y with the eyes on it, and that's what it means. It means it might be shifting between a Y and a W once you get it on the coast. But yeah, that's a really good question. It's a really good thought. But when I listen to old recordings of Tlingit and I write down what I hear, I'll usually put that in there. I'll write it like that if I'm hearing it. But when they speak fast, sometimes it's really hard to tell whether they're doing that or not.
Yeah, but like with Johnny Marks, like if he was on some of his tapes, and some of it is just like I feel like more we're saying like da sa rather than he says da se.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, that's another good one. So languages tend to have these sort of primary vowels that they go to. And for coastal Tlinkits, that's the A. It's an A sound, but sometimes it's an I if you need to plug something in there. And you'll see this. And so when you have like da sa, and you have ha and things like that. So another thing that you'll see is it's pretty common in car cross that an A will switch to an E. So when we say das away, a lot of times they might say das. Yeah, well, maybe not that one. The other thing that could be causing this is like in English, you have like bat, cat, hat, sat, rat. So you hear that like sound. That vowel does not exist in Tlingit. So what might be happening is when we hear people who spoke English first and learned Tlingit, their sound is a little bit more of an sound, whereas the old school Tlingit is more of a but then you have this sound. Like we say ha but if you go to car cross, you'll hear them say he. So that's another, this vowel switch. And I'll show you one more, just since we're on the concept of like sounds that shift and how tricky that could be. There's another one where this sound will become a letter A. And this one is a little bit sneaky sometimes. It's not that common, but one of the things that happens is when you start putting different words together. So if we do just some word math, we have dak, which means inland. We have tleo, which is sand. And then we have ut, which is something. And then we have this suffix I, which is a possessive suffix. So do you folks know what happens when you put all these together? So there's a number of different things that happen. One is most of the vowels are going to go short and low, right? That's just something, this is just something that happens. Everything collapses except for usually the last vowels. And so this is something that's pretty common whenever you make a compound word. And when we're listening to Tlingit, this is, especially with names and stuff, sometimes I'm trying to listen like, are the vowels getting smashed together? Because if they are, then it's becoming a single word. And that's why we would write this as one word, because people aren't saying dak, ati. They're not, it gets contracted. And so, but what happens right here is turns to ow. So this is pretty common. It's something that you will, well, I guess it's not that common, but it's a little bit predictable in terms of seeing that happen for whatever reason. Like we would expect that to just, you know, the short version of this vowel is E, right? You go from E, if you look at verbs and you had some sort of verb root that had EI in it, then it would be going to just the letter E when it got short. But for some reason, there are some of them when they collapse, they change to the letter A. Okay, that was a lot of stuff, but that was fun. Let's see. And then Sachuka, can you tell me the context of this word safe or safety? How you're trying to use it, then that'll help us figure out which one to use.
There are 4 words that I'm trying to look up for work. They have a totem pole raising that they're going to do, and they asked me to look up the words for hope, heal, peace, and safety. And so for hope, I got Tutan, and for heal, I got Kunagu, and peace is Kayesh. And then I couldn't find one for safety or safe.
Yeah, it's always a challenge to go like sort of a one for one when we're doing these sort of big concepts. Like, inspiration and freedom. And, you know, like sometimes in English, like this one word packs like a huge punch. And not to say that we don't have that type of thing, but sometimes when we're trying to sort of match them, sometimes we got to reach for sort of a different type of a meaning. For healing, I'd probably say qaneich. And what was the one that you had for healing?
I just had heal. That's all I found. It was kunagu.
Yeah, okay. That's like a doctor. So it means like they feel around a person, basically, or they kind of heal a person. So I do think it works, but qaneich would literally be like salvation or healing or recovery. I could put that in the chat, although I'm trying to figure out how to keep there's an underlined G on there. And for some reason, again, I'm just gonna try something. If it got long enough, would it do? Okay, so I need to, it's because it sort of gets chopped off if there's not a second line underneath it. So that's something to experiment with. So qaneich would be salvation. Safety, like I would probably recommend, let me see how to spell it. Maybe daily, although it's not really going to work as a one-for-one. And so what daily is it's a harbor that people would pull into if the weather got bad. So it's like a canoe. You can also call it like a canoe trail or a canoe. Oh, there's another term for it. But basically, if you're in your boat and the weather turns, you're like, we got to get to safety. We got to get to shore. And it comes from a verb root, which means to watch over something or to protect it. So when they built a house in Sitka for a program that was similar to Aware, so it's a place for women and children to go if they're in abusive situations or unsafe situations. And so they called it a daily hit. And it was like a safe harbor house is what they called it.
Can you put that in the chat too, please?
Oh yeah, so qaneich and daily are both in there. I guess I could put
The one you used for the safe harbor house.
Oh yeah, that was and yeah, okay. So Shkeki and Kuch. You guys have thoughts on it, contributions?
I was just thinking of when my grandma Shkata, when my mom was working for Sitka Tribe of Alaska, and it was actually right before Daisy Hit was created. They had a program that was for women's domestic violence, sexual assault, and it was the name of the program was Shawat Gune. And my grandma described it as women's safety. And I don't remember how Gune was described, but I just remember it being that Shawat Gune. Do you remember that Gune when it was up and running?
No, I don't remember that one. Huh, shucks. Well, I know there is this one which is I'm gonna have to put these dashes in here, so it'll go to a second line. So there's a low tone word which is qa, And qa on its own means pleasant or sheltered. And this is where, well, I think if I do the capital, will it work? So there, yeah, I guess it works in the capital. So there was a place called Qanakh, and so that's where Qanakh Adi and Qanakh Tedi comes from. It's from this sheltered harbor. And so you could say things like Qayati, like it's okay. It's safe, it's pleasant. They say Qaqaqwati, it's gonna be pleasant, it's gonna be good. And then there's a related but slightly different. So you could say there's one that can turn in, it's more of a suffix. And so you could say, shtuqa khaddati, I'm grateful. Akhtuqadati, I feel good. Yeah, wow. Yeah, I had to look around for that other one. Were you saying qunne or qudde?
Khatka?
Oh,
Gunei. Or shout it Gunei. 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 When you said that the it reminds me of, what about the Takte and Tan when they talk about Kanakha, the place where they come from too?
oh yeah, that could be.
That might have been part of, huh?
Wow. Yeah, if you had like shawat qanekh, that would make sense. So, well, just in terms of like matching up with these other words. And so sometimes when a fluent speaker talks too, they'll give you something that you've never heard of and that's not written down anywhere. And that's always a fun challenge. So yeah, ikanech is, oh yeah, there you go, be safe. Okay. So shawat qanekh would work, or shawat qanekh. Fun.
Nice to everyone.
Okay. And whenever people are coming up with names, if they want to use Tlingit names for things, you got to tell them, don't be afraid of the hard words, because sometimes they'll say, that's too hard for everybody to say. Can you come up with something easier? And I get a little frustrated when that happens. Okay, good stuff. Anything else? Any other thoughts, questions? So there was a group of us that were looking at a story, and I thought maybe we'd take a look at this story for a little bit. It's a big story. And so I know we were doing speeches for a little while, but maybe we'll turn back to narratives for a little bit and pick up the speeches again later. The speeches are a really important part, but then sometimes they're connected to all these different metaphors and things. And so some of you will certainly recognize what the story is, or it'll start to become clear. But I thought for maybe about 10 to 15 minutes, we'll just do this again, where we'll all take turns, read it. I'll repeat the sentence, and then we'll look at the English, it's right there. And then just tell me anything that you notice, that you wanted to point out, or that you might have questions about. And then I'll point out things that I want to just keep giving you folks tools on how to tell stories, because so much of what we do is like, oh man, I saw so-and-so, and you know, or I saw this, or this happened, or you know, funny stories, scary, like sometimes I sit around a table, I'm like, what are we doing here? Funny stories, hunting stories, scary stories, travel stories, fun, and then we just go back and just do this circle again. So storytelling is like such a powerful thing, and there's certain devices in Tlingit that are really helpful to have, so you can get from one thought to the next thought to the next thought. And some of it's how to tie things together, and other things how to say, okay, this thing happened, now sometime later this other thing happened. And then feel free to ask questions if you got them. So here we go. I think I might make the text bigger, perhaps. How's that? Does that look okay? Readable? So you'll start and just read. Some of them are a little bit long, I guess. Read until you hit the period. So, you might be going for a little while. So whoever wants this first one, it's 10 lines. Gook.
I'll do it. Oh.
Gook, Elias.
يا أخيش خيرخ يا كولنيك يا أخيش خيرخ هستو dot شكلنيك أدي start وستي يا شوخ أنخ يا ها كخ كواشي يا أنوشي أدي start وستي يا كوشلقاو.
Sheesh. Ya ach ish chedach aya kak kwashanik. Ya ach ish chedach hast du Dutch gashnik. Ade start chusati ya. Ya shukhanach. Ya hakach kuwashi. Ya anushi. Ade start chusati ya kushagao. Before we look at the English, anything you guys see?
This was as my father said it.
Yeah, my father said it.
Yeah, and so and look at that. There's some things you can do. There's no verb before, like there is a verb here as far as what he's gonna do, but there's no verb right here. So and Nora, she used to say from the lips of my father, but it's literally from my father's mouth. And then he says it again, right? What else do we see? And what is that? Shukana. First. Okay. Anything else we recognize in there?
Anushi is Russian, I think.
Yeah. So there's Russian. That's
and
neat.
I'm
go ahead.
thinking of de Stark Wusiti. So it looks like that's an English word being put in with Tlingit grammar.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty fun.
Yeah.
So whenever you have ade and then you have ye, and with some, usually an I, sometimes a U on the verb, ade, verbi, ye, the way the verb happened. So start chusati is like, well, basically this comes together like the way it started. You could say that whole thing in Tlingit. It's always fun to see when these old speakers would just drop English in there. There's a story by Willie Marks where I think he was getting in trouble for using too much English. So he counted in Cantonese just to be funny, I think. So let's take a look at the English now. So we get, I will tell the story according to my father, the story about them according to my father. Yes, the way it started from the beginning of the Russians who found us, the way the battle started. So, yeah, ach ish chedach ayah kak kwashanik. There should probably be a tone on there. I am going to tell it. And a story. So this L classifier, if there's a zero classifier, you're telling news. Kak kwanik, I'm telling information or news. Kak kwashanik, I'm going to tell the story of it. Hastu dot shkashnik. So this shkashnik is a noun built out of a verb. You're going to see that pretty commonly. Yuchatunk comes from a verb. Shkashnik comes from a verb. Hastu dot, about them, shkashnik, story. Ah, you gotta know how to throw an ah in there. It's a nice mental pause. So is aweh. It just sounds so much more yakutzage in Tlingit, rather than saying Just switch your ums to ah, and woo, your smartness level goes up many levels, even though you're doing the same thing. The way it started, yashukhanach. In the context of this, when he says that, he's like, first of all, Yahakach kuwashi'ah. So here's ha, our, kach kuwashi'ah. This verb means to, they were looking for and found. That's basically what that verb means, right? So there's a command form like aqaqnashi, go look for it. But then the qaqnashi, or I could say aqaqkhwashi, I was looking for it. But that qa, if it changes to kach, that means I found it and I was looking for it. So the ones that were looking for us, the Russians, this is how it started. And Kushagao is a fight. Okay. Next sentence. Here's the end. Here's the beginning. Who wants to read it? Oh,
I'll do it.
okay, sheesh.
Ak ish kedak aya kajak kedak.
Goodness.
Who? Oh, never mind.
Ach ish chedach aya kajak chedach. So kajak is a name, just that we're not trying to break that down. It probably means beating people up. That's what it looks like to me. Just, I mean, like Mike Tyson's name, right? But so there's, as far as what he's doing here, he's communicating a lot without a single verb, right? But he's just continuing. So as he's telling this is going to be a big story. So as he starts telling this story, he's like, what he's saying is like, this is how my dad said it. This is how my dad said it. And this is an elderly person probably recorded maybe in the 1970s or 80s. So this is what he's doing is he's letting you know, like, this is from the source, right? And so there's a lot of things you can do. If you're telling big stories like this that are clan histories or whatever, it's good to sort of just note where you heard this from. Like Kingeiste, Dave Katzig, when he was telling this, he told a Qanakhtaiti story, and I asked him to do it. And before he even did, he gave this long talk about who he is, how he's related, who he heard this from. And so he put it back to Qajit Kuhig by just doing this long introduction. And so, A, you don't tell another clan's history, but B, sometimes that clan will ask you to tell that history. And so it's a little bit, it's not as clear cut as like copyright infringement. But it's something we should continue to be aware. There's some things you can do for your father's peoples because that's how you show that you love them. And there's certain things you can do for your grandparents and for your grandchildren. And so it's not as clear cut. I've seen clans put their atu on someone who's just like their clan opposite. And so it's not as clear cut as this is ours and you don't touch it, right? And so, but at the same time, if you don't have that permission or authority, you don't do that in public. Okay. What about, who wants to read this one?
I could read that.
Eesh.
Hooch clock ach in a cowslinik.
Okay. Hooch tlak ach in a cowslinik. So just note there's no apostrophe there. So it's not hooch, right? Just in terms of like making sure we're interpreting this. Anything anybody recognizes there?
Something they used to tell us long ago, or something they've always said. Ancient, maybe.
Okay.
I guess.
Well, the tlak, when it's short like this, it usually means always, like all the time.
They're always telling us. Huh?
Yeah, a lot of times you're going to hear cha right before it, tlak away, and then it's something that always happens. Quite often, like if there's a tlak in there, it'll push the verb to be some repetitive form, and it doesn't happen here. Ach in a kaushanig is they, a singular they, told me the story, right? So here's this indirect object again. Ach in, to me. It, kaushanig, they told the story of. What about the hooch thing? Anybody got any ideas there?
Maybe this is just a shot in the dark, man, but they don't really tell it anymore like that.
That's a good shot. That's a good shot. So this CH marker can go onto a noun to tell you who's doing the noun, right? And so a lot of times, like if we revisit that mosquito story, there's times when the teller needs to let you know that this is the cannibal that does it. And in the raven stories, you'll hear yesh. If it's ever getting unclear who's doing something, because sometimes like, then they did this, then they did this, then they did this, they'll throw that CH on there to make it clear who's doing it. The other thing is because there's no gender or any in these pronouns, sometimes you need to put a CH on there to make it clear who's doing the thing, right? So when they'd say, what's that name? What's happening? Did the cat grab your tongue? And so when they translated that, they put the CH on the cat to let you know that the cat's doing it. So this CH can also go onto independent pronouns. So for example, if you and I are sitting in the room and I'm the older sibling and you're the younger sibling, and mom comes in and says, make coffee. Then I might look at you and say, what H? You do it, right? And so that's what that CH is doing on there. It's marking who's doing it. So you have what H, chach, for me to do it, and huh can become hooch. And so that just means this third person is doing it. So it's my father, from the mouth of my father, from the mouth of, and this is the name of his father. He's the one who did it. He always would tell me. He often told this to me. Sheesh. Let's do a couple more, then we'll take a break. Who's next?
Which line is it?
Yep.
Achaya Kwasaku.
Sheesh.
Sukat Kwaqeq Klal Asakutin.
Okay.
Keep going or quit there?
That's good.
All right.
Achaya Kwasaku. Klesukut Akhwaqiq Kle Asakutin. Let's do the first one. Anybody recognize that? Want to take a stab at it?
Achaya, this is the way I learned it. I came to know it.
So if you want to say this is the way I know it, you would say ye awe chosaku. But yeah, you got the knowing part. What about this ach ayah?
Is it
Why?
the way I understand?
Go ahead.
The way I understand it, like heard it, understand it.
Or this is why?
This is why. So we have ach ayah and ach aweh. And there's two different ways that those can be used, especially if they start a sentence, right? Ach ayah, it's usually saying this is why, but it could also be saying because of this. It could be used either way, either way. So I could say, Kesh ach tua ushku ach yagu o akawawatli. Ajwe kesh at chakuch chutle konachju satani. I don't want my boat to be wrecked. That's why I don't go boating when the ocean is rough. So like, this is a very good way to tie something together. Usually, most often when it starts a sentence, it's tying it right back to what this person just told you. This is the reason. Ach ayah chwasaku. That's why I know it. And so whenever, this is a big story, right? This is fighting with the Russians, a big story. And so because he's going to tell you this big story, there's a number of things that this storyteller wants you to do. Like, I heard this a lot. This is why I know it. Okay, what do you guys recognize in the next one's a little bit more challenging. Anything that you see, and we'll look at the English, so no worries.
Seeing something.
Kesh su kut a chwaqi tle asaqutin. I would probably put a space right there. Okay, so asaqu is 2 words. Anybody recognize anything? We'll look at the English.
Is kut lost?
Yes, kut is lost. So this is going to come before certain types of verbs. So if I said kut chogud, I got lost. So it's a place, it's a direction, and there's certain things. This one, anybody know what chwaqiq is on its own? It's okay if we don't know. Chwaqiq is to throw something, usually just a solid single thing, because there's like 4 different ways to throw things. But like if you throw in a rock, that would be chwaqiq. But if you say qut chwaqiq, it's a metaphor. I lost it. And it's a very powerful metaphor because you could say things like, I've heard speakers use this to say, I forgot it. But what they're really saying is they're saying, I should know, but I lost it. That's different than kechwasaku, and it's different than a katchatsewukak. So, and you're sitting there, you're like, I know their name, but I lost it somehow. I've also heard this phrase, that's what Nora said when she lost her husband. It's like, and I was so amazed to hear it because she was in a lot of grief. But when she said that, it's like she is the one who did it. Like this is what you would say if like you lost your keys or something. You did that thing. So then when we look at the translation, I didn't forget any of the names, right? So there's layers of meaning here. Klesh, not. Tsu, again. Kut, lost. Khwaqiq. So I'm going to introduce you to a new pronoun here. Some of them. So there's Tlingit has lots of pronouns. Like we got pronouns for this, we got pronouns for that. And so what we do in beginning Tlingit is we show you like look at these 6 pronouns. Isn't that cool? But then we don't tell you like there's a curtain, and behind the curtain there's like 50 more that are hiding and waiting to pounce on you. But this is one of them, but you have heard it. It jumps over a verb root and sometimes forms a noun, like chita, gukha, khasha, hita, chuta, the one that does that thing. So it could mean, and we also talked about this the other day with ahu ah, some of them, right? So this is how you could say ahwacha, I ate some. So what you're saying is like not all of it, but some of it. Kesh sukut ahwagig ke asakutin. I didn't lose any of it. That's how I would translate this one. Kesh sukut ahwagig. I didn't forget any of it. Ke then asakutin, with their names, with the names of it. This is the plural form of names, asaku. So what we're going to do in intermediate Tlingit is we're just going to tell little stories. Went to the store, got some sugar, whatever, just nothing. There's not a lot writing on, if you get it wrong, it's no big deal. Well, you want to get yourself up to become like a master level speaker, you're going to have to tell some of these stories. I need to tell you folks where our clan comes from. And that requires a little bit more of this don't get it wrong type of thing, but no pressure right now. We're just looking at the way the storyteller talks and start setting up the delivery of the narrative. Okay, let's take a break. What do you want, 5, 10? It's the wishes of the group. 2, 1.
And cut.
Okay, see you in 10 minutes. Okay. So we might come back to that story. We'll just sort of keep pushing through that story until we get through the whole thing. But then I want to mix that up with some lessons and also some conversations. So we're going to go back to this. So we're looking at verbs and we're practicing just changing them based on some patterns that we've seen. To sort of go back, we had cha, which is the verb root for eating. So here's what the theme looks like. Let me keep the chat open.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes.
I tried to find this to look over it like this weekend. Where is this one located at? This?
Let me take a look and see if I might not have put it up, but let me double check.
Oh, okay.
And then someone's reminding me. I gave you guys 5 sentences to write over the weekend. Is that correct?
Yep.
And what were they about?
Love.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, well, let me look for this and then what you guys are doing. Okay, so I don't think oh wait, no, I did. Okay, here, let me show you folks where it's at. Okay, so here's tlingitlanguage.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go to Learning Tlingit and Intermediate Tlingit, this is where our class material is. It was kind of going through a transition for a little bit, but I think everything's working now. So if you go down, here's spring semester. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'll upload usually every night after class. Sometimes it takes a day.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be the date, the link to watch the class if you wanted to watch it again or in case you missed it. And then there'll be the basic sort of things we covered. And then there will be, oh, okay. I'll check out the dictionary. Okay, I'll look at that. Then here's the chat from, as we're chatting through class. And then sometimes there'll be notes, like if I put that screen up and I was just typing stuff out, so then I'll make that into a smaller thing. And then if there's any handouts, they'll be here. So if you go back to January 14th, this one is called Intro to Tlingit Verbs.
Oh, okay.
That's what this one is that we're looking at.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And maybe you could also find that other places. Most of them are under resources, but it's great if we've used it in class.
Oh yeah, so resources and I guess
Verbs, maybe
curriculum for some reason. I don't know what I'm doing. But if you go to slideshows, I've tried to put every slideshow that I use to teach on here.
I haven't looked at slideshows. I've looked at a lot of other places.
Yeah.
And there it is right there. So okay, sheesh. So okay, let's share some. And then I did the dictionary link and it worked for me. So I see what you're saying, the HTML one. Let me check it. I might need to update that. And sheesh. So let's before we do, let's share some of our sentences then. Starting with Sachuka, because you didn't get to do yours from the last set that we did. And we might save our Valentine Day love phrases for Thursday. We'll see. Give everyone a couple more days to write from the heart.
No, I'm looking for it. Sorry.
No worries. Mittens, are you looking for the word for mittens? So the word for gloves is actually mittens. And then to say gloves, you'd say so fingered mittens. So
Oh, all right. The reason is because I saw a language lesson with like Bernie's mittens.
Bernie's saki. Yeah.
Yes.
That they're seen everywhere.
Finish juice.
Gande kachgal ad hasyak kashadeng nach I. Gande chasichan aka kudzit yu khatank kau ye wuti. Shitu ka khat diti du ye jini ye adat. Spende we ti hitan ka ye wuti Tongass village dach.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah, can't kudzati chalk. Kunach chalk the claw was the aniki. The claw aya. She could zishkashni kudzati away the dot. Who away? Shatkatsko husatiin. Ni klein our shot. Got to talk at the ish. Ye hasu a jean. Ya hayeti kukwana. A joy we icht. Khande haswu art. De tuasagu we icht aya. Oxeneche. Has to seek. Ye icht. Du sai aya ye wuti. Shkundi. Ye awa. Hu awe wunech. Aqa away. Klitsini shawat khusati. Get to eat. Do yeet has. Kleid kach enach William Ka Lewis. Ka kach aya has kushagao. Ya yik e kusti has to tuasagu. The cutway Tlingit has to GKT. A and B ka ANS on aya has outlay as yeji wunein. Ya wa wuk e kun chish. There's an amazing story about his mother, which you can read about in his work and also in the work that the Dauenhauers did with their biographies in the book Hakusti. But when she was young, she got really sick and her parents thought that they were going to lose her. They brought her to an Icht and he healed her and his name was Shkundi. So that's why she named her son after that Icht. And so she recovered. She had like an arranged marriage and she ran away from it. And then she went to school and she just lived this amazing life, was a civil rights hero. I think when William Paul, so she had sons, William and Lewis, they were both amazing civil rights leaders. They worked a lot with the A&B. I think when William Paul was pushing for the right to vote, like his mother was one of the ones who just went in and voted. Like, well, I'll just go vote then. And so they were crossing those lines. Like we see lots of stories about civil rights leaders where they're like, here's the line. And then they cross that line. They sit in the bus, they go in the restaurant, they push that envelope to say, well, what's going to happen if we all do this? And so that was part of their strategy, was to protest through these things by just being in those spaces that they were prohibited from. So, okay, and sheesh. Anybody else have their civil rights? You know, we did this thing going back to right after Martin Luther King Day to think about like civil rights leaders and talking about them. And okay. So Thursday we'll start class with everybody sharing your, and there had to be love. You could be anti-Valentine's Day, you could be anti-love, whatever you want to say about it. But that's just sort of the theme as we start moving towards Valentine's Day. And as the displays in the stores, they put away that stuff and then they'll bring out all the Valentine's stuff and then they'll put away that stuff and they'll bring out all the Easter stuff. So, you know, we're just tuned into the cycles of that kind of thing. And whenever you're doing this stuff, don't worry about, just worry about communicating. And then we're not going to look at it and correct anything. We're just going to try and respond to it. So my challenge to you all is to respond to each other. Oh, did I freeze?
Mhm.
Okay, so we're not trying to get it perfect. We're just trying to communicate. And so the challenge to you all is to respond to each other. And, you know, so communicate. That's what we're just trying to do, is just communicate. Okay, so going back into this, oops, let me keep that open. Sheesh. So looking at this verb, again, there's an object, can't forget it's there. There's a subject, that's also there. Someone's gonna eat it. And then it's a zero group classifier, so it's gonna be zero or ya. And then you have cha is the root. There's another cha, which is why there's a number 1 here, and that one is to paddle. So as we go through, we look at this. That's in the wrong spot. So this is either going to be 0 or ya. In most cases, it's 0, 0, ya, 0. As we go through, and I'm just going to show you these and we'll get built back up to where we're predicting, right? So the command form, cha, doing it right now. I am eating it, cha cha. You are eating it, icha. They are eating it, acha. I ate it, chua. So you see that? Short, short. So short, low, short, high to long, low, long, high. Chua. So just focus on those vowels as well, what they're doing. You ate it. Iyacha. They ate it. Awacha. I will eat it. Kakwacha. You will eat it. Kaqicha. Or kaqicha. They will eat it. Akwacha. Oh, that changed back. Okay. So those are the eating ones. We move on to the drinking ones. So here we have the verb. There's an object. So we remember that object so that when it goes third person, there's going to be the in front of it. It's a subject. This one is D plus 0. That means it's a 0 group, but it's plus D. So we should expect D or da. Most cases da. In the perfective, you'll get D. Na, and there's that number 1. There's another one which means to moisten something or to put lotion on things, to be damp. But this one is to drink. So we're going to have da and di. That's what the classifier is going to do. Da, da, di, da. Okay? The command form. Drink it. Itna. I am drinking it. Khadna. Oh, sheesh. And then, yeah, we're just doing a bit of a review because I think it was a couple weeks ago. You are drinking it. Itna. So maybe I'll skip the English now so we could speed up a little bit. Adana. Khwadana. Yidana. Audana. Kakwadana. Kakidana. Agukhdana. Cooking. Object, subject, S classifier. So we should expect si and sa. And then there's the verb root E. So there's sa and si, right? Sa, si, sa. So going through. Sa'i. That's a command form. Cook it. Khasa'i. Isa'i. As'i. Khosa'i. Yisa'i. Ausa'i. Kakhasa'i. Kaqisa'i. Agukhsa'i. Now we're caught up with laser vision here. To watch it or to take care of it. Or to look at it. So there it is. Object, subject, L group classifier. Teen. And there's some other teen, right? Verb root. So we get shle or shle. And it'll be shle. In this case, only in the perfective. What this I marks, that the verb happened. That's what that I marks. So when I say, look at it, shatin, chashatin, ishatin, ashtin, chwashatin, yishatin, aushatin, kakwashatin, kakwashatin, kakishatin, agukshatin. In the future, for the positive future, it's going to happen. They'll be long and high. Teen, teen, teen. So now we're set up to kick it. Okay, so this is the kicking verb. Trying to turn off my things. There we go. Okay. So here we see, again, just getting ready to predict this thing. Object, subject, zero group classifier, tseich. Okay. So we should expect zero in for most of the classifiers. The perfective will be ya. So, any guesses for kick it? Yeah, away. Sech. So this is commanding someone to kick it. Kick it. Sech. I am kicking it. I'm gonna start with cha.
Chasech.
Chatzecht. Right, so there's a little bit of a trick here, okay?
Yeah.
This is a little bit unpredictable, this T coming on there. The reason why the T, and sometimes there'll be an underline X, sometimes there'll be a CH, sometimes there'll even be a K. What this suffix does is it just signals some sort of repetition. So that means I'm doing it now, but sometimes it means it involves like, I might be kicking it, kick, 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 or like I'm clubbing it or something. So it's something where like it can happen a bunch of times, but it's still in Tlingit considered a single action. Okay, so now we get, but what's gonna happen with these ones? This tsecht, will stay the same. So the T will be there, the vowel will be short and high. So you're kicking it.
Isek.
Yeah, Isa.
Itzecht. Yeah.
Ooh.
Itzecht. So that T stays on the end. They are kicking it. So there's an object in the subject, so it should be start with the letter A.
David and I think atset.
Atzecht.
Ooh, just
Atzecht.
short.
Right. So yes, and so once you get the vowel, once you get the stem for one of these, it'll be exactly the same, because it's in this sort of mode. That mode will tell you what the vowel is going to be in the stem. Zecht, zecht, zecht. Okay. I kicked it.
Quasecht.
Choatzech. And so now the T falls off because it's not happening. It already happened, right? But now this tells us tzech, 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 all the way across, right? I kicked it. You kicked it.
Isech.
Isa.
So we have E right here, but we should expect that ya to pop up here. Ietzech,
Isa.
ietzech.
Yes.
And what you're going to learn here is this one is usually going to be either iya or ye. It'll be one, but that perfective marker kind of needs to be there, right? And so that perfective marker for now, it says it's kind of has already happened, but we'll look at that a little bit later. It's a little bit more complicated than that. They kicked it. Awatzech, yeah, away. So chwa iya awa, chwa iya awa. These are the patterns will become familiar, and then they'll become entirely predictable. And this unlocks a lot of things. It takes a lot of mental work when we're first getting into it, but pretty soon you'll just be able to just throw these things around, right? I'm gonna kick it. So, but in this future, it always will go long and low. It just goes, it stretches it out, right? So, but now we have this, you are gonna kick it. Yeah, or so this ga can just be a K. Take your pick. It could be either one. They are going to kick it. Whoops. So here's the it's got to be on there because there's a third person object. Okay, I'll be right back. I think my dog's got to go outside. Hold on.
I'd love to have someone read the futures.
Ooh.
I guess it's up to you, Hune.
Okay. Kukwatsech.
Kakwatsech.
Kakitsech.
Akaitsech.
Akwatsech.
Akwatsech.
So,
Goodness, geez.
and what you're going to see is there's certain little things that pop up, just like the ed or the ing in English. And there's certain combinations, like once you put these things in the right combination, future, this combination, perfective, right? Okay, so now we're going to know.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, the Aguathek is like your Aquaman
Yes,
poster.
that's the
There it is. Thank you.
Jason Momoa. He's going to help us. Okay, so here's the knowing verb, right? So here we got, there is an object there. So that's why we're going to say ausaku. So that's what the is doing there. There's a subject. It's an S classifier. So we should expect sa or si, and then ku. So there's other ku verbs there. Oops, let me fix this real quick. Okay. So I'm going to give you one additional morsel of information, even though it's only 5 minutes of class left. So looking at these verbs, we learn to start looking for things. Oh yeah, there's an object there. I got to pick something from that wheel of object pronouns. Chat, ha, I, ye. The third person is either nothing or if there's also a third person subject. Ka, at. Then there's a subject. Oh yeah, there's someone's gonna do it. Tu, I, ye. Third person is always unmarked, 0. Du, someone would do at. It's a known thing. The classifier, it's going to be se or sa. The root, it's going to be ku, or ku. Those are my 3 options. This 0 thing tells us the conjugation type. There's 4 of them. 0, na, ga, and ka. This will factor into some things. You're gonna learn how that affects the verb. Then there's a verb type. So we have an action verb, which we call act, someone to do something, usually to someone or something. This is what we call an event verb. The thing you need to remember about an event verb is there's no point when it's happening. Hasn't happened, happened. That's what you get. There's no in between. So this is a good verb to start learning this stuff with, because you don't know it, getting to know it, right? And so this is the logic of the language is embedded in all of this stuff. And don't be surprised if it's getting complicated, because the thought world of our ancestors reveals the genius of our ancestors. Okay. And so you'll see this, and don't worry if it doesn't make sense yet. But there's an act verb, someone does something. An event verb, something happens. A state verb, something to be a certain way. A motion verb, something to move. And a position verb, something to be located somewhere. If you've spoke Tlingit at all, you've probably used all 5 of them at some point, right? And we'll just keep an eye on these things. Right now, we're just focused on this, moving this cha, I, 0. Cha, I, 0. Me, you, them. Me, you, them. So we should expect sa and si for this one. I think we're going to run out of time, though. So we'll pick up here on Thursday remember, you're gonna write some 5 or so Valentine's Day sentences. When you hear your partners, your colleagues, your fellow learners speak their sentences, try and think of something to say in response. We can collaborate on some blues songs. If you want an anti-Valentine's Day, we could do those. We could learn, there's not a big gap between khusakhan and khushakan, love and hate. And so, we can have fun with some. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, so sometimes we just laugh and make jokes. We could write a country song or a blues song, and then you just have fun with it. So the point is just to have fun. If you're feeling lonely or anything, we could learn how to talk about that too. And we support each other and just be kind with each other. We're always just trying to have fun and learn. But I've seen all kinds of stuff like I've seen, and so just in terms of how to talk about this, because we also got to talk about too, like sometimes breakups happen, sometimes these things, and we can learn how to talk about that stuff too. My heart is broken, and we don't want anybody to have to feel like that, but sometimes people do, and you gotta learn how to talk about, or else you'll switch to English to describe those things to your folks that are speaking Tlingit. And as we keep going further and further into this, our 4th semester of studying Tlingit, we're going to start learning how to let go and let go and let go of the English.
Yep.
Cheese.
Goodness, cheese.
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 Tuye kwasatin.
Pati.